Hello, and welcome to the Money Marketing Podcast. It is that time again, and I'm joined by the whole editorial team to do our end of March wrap up. So if you guys could introduce yourselves.
Hello, I'm Katie Pigden, the editor of Money Marketing.
I'm Michael Clums, the news editor.
Hi, I'm Lois Valley, chief reporter.
I'm Amanda Newman-Smith, feature writer.
Hi, I'm JB Andreas.
Hi, I'm Mohamed Musatwe, just reporter.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining me again, guys. So I thought we could start off by talking about the spring statement. As it was kind of there was a lot of big anticipation this month as to what the Chancellor would come up with. So I can see from our stats, one of our best stories this month was the industry reacts to Sunak's pension triple lock promise. So can you give me a little bit of your opinion or anything you heard about industry reactions to the spring statement?
I got quite lucky that day, Kim, actually, because spring statement or the budgets are usually a very, very busy day in the office for the team. And I had a hospital appointment in the morning, so I sort of swanned in while everyone had their headphones on. You know, it was deep in sort of trying to analyse what he'd said and been going through the sort of papers. So I feel quite guilty. I just sort of offered to help send out a few newsletters that day. And actually, Mike and the team would have poured out the real juicy bits as it was happening live. So Mike, in terms of news, do you want to jump in on that first?
Of course. Well, first thing, thanks, Katie. The first thing I wanted to say was that we produced an awful lot on the day and in the run up to the spring statement. So the reporters collectively produced 20 separate pieces of content in less than a week. That includes us writing and sourcing individual pieces of content. Most of it was produced on the day. In terms of big things that we saw from Chancellor Rishi Sunak, one was a hike in the national insurance threshold to pay for the social care levy. So that was expected. And he also cut fuel duty to help business and households across the country. But broadly speaking, I think for advisors and in terms of the advice sector, it was a bit of a damp squib. And I think a lot of advisors would have liked more from the Chancellor, but he didn't give it to them. So I think disappointment was probably one of the big headlines.
In terms of that triple lock that Kim mentioned, is this something that, you know, the government is going to be able to sustain, obviously with all of the cost of living, like you were talking about, and various other things? Obviously, it's definitely a winning vote thing, usually, for a certain proportion of the government's supporters. But obviously, there was the talk of sort of freezing it for a while. Who was the one that produced the story that shot right up the rankings?
That was done by Unikete.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, the pension, triple lock was kind of like suspended before because of the coronavirus, pandemic. And that's kind of like affected pensioners, you know. And as someone, rightly mentioned, pensioners were put in a position where they have to choose between buying food or, keeping the house warm, you know.
Mm.
So, with this new statement by Sunak to kind of like reintroduce, the triple lock, that's a welcome news. For the pension sector, and that will start. From next year, April.
Any other spring statement stories?
Well, I think obviously the triple lock was the big one. So some things which were missed out. So one was capital gains. We didn't hear anything about that. The OBR came out and said that there will be a big fall in living standards, and Jean-Baptiste wrote that story.
Yeah. So I guess there really wasn't much that the industry had to react to in terms of the spring statement. So let's move on. So when it came to March, we covered a lot of other things. So can you tell me personally what you wrote about that stood out to you in the March issue or online in March? Yeah, Lois?
So for the March issue, obviously in March, it was International Women's Day on the 8th. So I really enjoyed writing the cover feature for March. I think I mentioned it in last month's podcast, just very briefly, but it was basically an expansion of a leader that I wrote for, I think it was the January issue, about how white male dominated the financial services sector and particularly the financial advice profession, and sort of what the industry itself can do to change things, not just in terms of men and women, obviously, just to sort of make the sector more diverse generally. But obviously, because it was International Women's Day, that's what my cover feature sort of focused on.
Mm-hmm.
But also what money marketing can do to, and is doing, to try and change things. We obviously get mixed reaction from our audience to this. Quite a lot of them are very supportive, and that we are also seeing some good steps being taken. But there's definitely a lot more that we can do to make the industry more diverse and to encourage more women, particularly, into it.
It created quite an interesting debate online, didn't it, Lois, as to whether we actually come under financial services.
It did, yeah.
I think we would suggest we're more in the media publishing,
which I think generally is probably more diverse than certainly financial advice. Yes, I think we'd probably be called honorary members of financial services, but I certainly wouldn't say I work in financial services, but open to interpretation, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're happy to be, associated with it and to be writing about it. But that's where we're sort of getting the profession to try and look at itself a little bit more and realize that there are some of those problems out there, or if people sort of feel that they can actually apply for jobs in this profession. It's nice to see that there are obviously some younger people coming through as well. It is shifting. Obviously, it's better than it was. But I think, like you said, Lois, there's still a long way to go. So we were just sort of highlighting that that's an important thing. Actually, on International Women's Day, though, Lois and I were quite fortunate enough to go to a breakfast meeting, which
was Soho.
Yeah, just to put that in there. Actually, talking of those like younger people that we're seeing coming through, there was an absolutely fantastic debate, and probably a lot that we could all learn from these young people of how you construct these arguments. And even if you don't necessarily agree with what someone else is saying, it was the fact of listening to what that person was saying and seeing what you could take from it and responding accordingly. And it was very much whether we should have that sort of positive discrimination, which is what you touched on in your leader previously, wasn't it, Lois?
Yeah, it's a very contentious issue. Obviously, positive discrimination itself is not legal in employment in this country, but that doesn't necessarily mean it wouldn't do the industry some good. I think it's, some people say, sort of positive affirmation, is it called, which is slightly less. So I think positive discrimination is actively making sure you have 50% split, whereas positive affirmation is when you encourage people, more diverse people, to interview for the job, but you sort of give it to the best candidate. I think, I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, it was a very interesting. And when we say young, like some of these children were 9 years old who were arguing this issue at this event. So it was very impressive. Definitely things I'd like to learn.
Yeah, same.
So you probably use all the language that the woke people use.
Oh, yeah.
Well, talking of that very word woke, Kim, so it was International Women's Day last year when I was officially announced as taking over as editor. So we were actually putting out to the public the fact that we'd rebranded, we were introducing the monthly magazine, there was a few sort of changes going on. I think it was just a happy coincidence. It wasn't sort of planned, like, this person's becoming editor and she happens to be a woman, great. But it just sort of dawned on me that I was only the second female editor in the history of money marketing, and that's great. I'm very happy to be that and have that title, but it just got me thinking, am I really only the second best female to have got to that stage, or was there a reason that stopped women from going for it previously? I had my own doubts about taking the job, and I've sort of made no secret of that. But actually, I retweeted what Money Marketing had put out and said, "Oh, this is interesting. I'm dropping the news from my job title, and I'm just going to have the editor." And it just happens to be International Women's Day, and one of the replies came, "Oh, another woke," and then journalist in speech marks, and I was like, why? I mean, I don't know why that comment stood out more than the others. The majority were lovely. People were really, really nice. But this one stood out, and it was from an advisor. And I just thought, well, can you imagine if I'd have put in response to you, yes, thank you, advisor, in speech marks? It's just, do we really need to sort of have that? So actually, for my editor's view for the magazine to coincide with Lois's cover feature, I sort of drew reference to that and said that, really, I think we could do with building people up a little bit more than tearing them down, and sort of acknowledging the good and some of these things. I don't think I was chosen because I was a woman, hopefully because I've got decent journalist skills. I'll let the audience decide if that is the case. But, it's that sort of thing. And actually, someone then commented on the article online sort of saying, oh, well, I think you'll find that it's more women that cause each other problems. And you're like, well, no, actually, in this case, it was a man. And that's not saying that obviously women don't have sort of squabbles, or maybe they're not always building each other up as they could. But in this particular instance, it was a man that had challenged me on my woke journalism credentials.
I don't even know what you've done that's been woke, apart from, I don't know, pointing out certain subjects that might make them feel uncomfortable. But
well, I think on that particular one, I'm not sure if it was just the fact that I'd mentioned I was a woman. I don't know what else it was.
How dare you?
But, anyway, I'll take it. But if they ever want to discuss my qualifications with me, I'm sure we can have that conversation.
Let's sit down. Okay, great. But I wanted to hear from everyone else. So, Momadou, what stood out to you in March?
Do you mean the magazine or?
Yeah, both online, whatever content you wrote that you felt most taken with.
Yeah, well, for the magazine, I was privileged to interview Guardian Financial Services chief, boss, Katia McLean, and we discussed the protection markets in what was Guardian's kind of like the story. It's also a story. Of Guardian Financial Services. And she kind of like explained to me the unique selling point of Guardian. Why Guardian? Is a contender in this sector. Mm-hmm. So that was one that that kind of started for me. And then the second one I did for online was on pension provider. Critical medical, they're poor customer service.
Yeah.
That kind of like stood out, for me too. So those were the two things that kind of like made the most impression on me,
Yeah.
That seems to be a common theme, doesn't it? This poor customer service that we're starting to see. Not saying that obviously every company is like this. There's some that probably are delivering absolutely wonderful service, and we're happy to hear that as well. But you've had some stuff on Mercer. I think you had WTW. And also, we're approaching that interesting time of year for advisors, that end of tax year, very, very busy. And we're seeing online that, services providers, platforms are falling over. They are not sort of delivering the service that we need. So if there's anyone out there that's encountering problems, let us know and we'll look into it a little bit more. Like I say, equally, if some companies are doing very, very good job, we're happy to hear that as well. But it does just seem to be a common theme that's cropping up time and time again. I think there's still people using the pandemic as the excuse, we're sort of dealing with that. we're over 2 years in now. I don't think that's a valid excuse anymore.
No, that's very true. I mean, I think that's very true. And the advisors we spoke to, that's also the same issue. They said, they said kind of like they can still be blaming the pandemic, for all this, for customer service, So I think that's something that should be kind of like addressed, So hopefully, the regulators will, do something to kind of like, deal with this pertinent issue, that has been affecting, customers and advisors alike,
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you, Mamadou. Amanda, what stood out for you in the March issue?
Well, Kim, I've been doing a few things lately on well-being. In the magazine, I've got a piece on advisors' well-being. The idea behind that was to look at how, advisors who support maybe vulnerable clients, how they can be supported themselves. Because, if you're not okay yourself, it's hard to kind of support someone else. So that was the rationale for looking at this. But what I found out was that times have changed. In financial services, someone mentioned it was like pushing water uphill with a fork to get advice firms and, financial advice businesses in general to kind of look at these well-being issues for advisors. But it's all different now, probably because of the pandemic. We're all sort of looking at these issues more. But it's interesting that firms have now got strategies in place for everything for, mental health to the menopause. And I know sometimes this can be uncomfortable, but, it's all about culture, and it's how firms kind of create that culture where it's a safe space for people to say if they're struggling with anything, as opposed to just maybe the old-fashioned way of keeping it all in, and not sharing this stuff. So, I've been looking at that, and also did a spin-off feature, based on the menopause as well for our online section as well. And that was really interesting because I didn't realise, I suppose, the menopause is something that all women do have to go through at some point. You reach that point, but it never occurred to me how, this kind of tallies with the point where most people are at their, most senior appointment in the company, that they're doing, they've got the most responsibility both at home and in the workplace. And to have that sort of chucked in the mix as well, it's really, it's unsettling for people. And, I think it's important to be able to speak about that as opposed to just thinking, I'm okay, just get on with it, say nothing, do it, and then find you've got problems down the line, which ultimately affect the company. Because if that person can't cope and they end up, leaving, and, you've lost some good talent there. So that's what I've been, and it really stood out. It was an eye-opener for me, Kim.
Yeah, no, I think that resonated as well as your weekend essay that you did recently about fertility and finance, which I found quite interesting as well, because it was not something that I never thought about. And obviously, the way you kind of story tell when you're doing your weekend essays is also really interesting as well. So I just, I quite enjoyed that as well. I just wanted to point that out.
Oh, thank you, Kim. Yeah, it's a subject, as I mentioned, sharing some personal stories. It is something that I have probably not, the complete experiences. I didn't go down the fertility treatment, route, but I did explain that in the essay, why that wasn't appropriate to me, and how, maybe someone in my shoes would benefit from advice talking about all these issues, whether it's worth it, whether you're, spending money on this if you don't get NHS support with the cost, whether it's worthwhile and whatever. And I think, these are issues that maybe we didn't talk about 20 years ago, but it is okay to speak about them now, I think. It's just shows how times do move on. But I think there's also a reluctance among some people to recognise that times have moved on, and maybe they feel embarrassed that we're all sort of sitting there discussing maybe I don't want to say dirty linen, but you know what I mean, all our personal issues in public. I think can make some people uncomfortable, but I think we just have to move with the times here.
Yeah, okay, great. And JB, what about you? What stood out for you in March?
That's probably the story I wrote about defense stocks.
Okay.
So there's been a big debate in the investment world about, because defense stock has been performing quite well in recent times. Okay. And there's been quite a lot of debate around whether it is compatible with ESG, because that's also been one of the biggest trends in recent years. So yes, there's been a lot of discussion around the compatibility of these two sectors, I would say. And I have to say, it's been really hard to find people willing to comment on this. I guess it was a very sensitive issue.
Yeah, of course.
But it was an interesting talk. So the few people who accepted to discuss this issue with me had great insights, also as how defense stock might evolve in the future as ESG is becoming more and more important. So, for example, they might need to go on private markets for their survival. So yeah, it was probably the stories that, in my opinion, stood out the most.
So did you come to a conclusion on whether ESG and defense are compatible or not?
You're asking my personal opinion?
Yeah, sure.
Not really.
No, I wouldn't have thought so either.
No.
I feel like more destruction does not make for a better environment.
Yeah, but the question would be: do you actually want to invest, into ESG?
That's an ethical and moral dilemma that I don't think we have time or the depth to go into right now. So I'm going to move on to Mike. What stood out for you as what you wrote throughout March and stuff that you edited, looked over?
Well, carrying on from JB, I wanted to say that when I edited the piece that JB was just talking about, that was fascinating. I found that really, really interesting, and thought that it's a topic that I definitely want to read about more in the future. In terms of some of the stories that I covered, one was Aviva's acquisition of Succession Wealth, which was a very, very big story. And another one was the FCA banning Hartley pensions from trading. Hartley Pensions was a big SIP provider, and over the past few years had bought loads and loads of SIP businesses, and was a big consolidator and hoovering up all of these businesses with, perhaps you could say, dubious assets on their books. And it's finally come a cropper. So those are two of the big stories that really got my attention that I wrote.
Okay, great. I also wanted to point out some things that I enjoy. Well, I edit and look over the weekend essays and all the podcasts that come in. So I get to listen to all your wonderful voices on a regular basis. So I really enjoyed Lois's Chanel handbag. Is a Chanel handbag a good investment? I also liked that it really got some people going in terms of the discussion on the website as well.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. I was completely persuaded, and I know exactly what I'm getting for my birthday this year. So
lucky you. I wish I was.
I mean, it's on my wish list. It's going to happen, but I can add it to my wish list and say it is an investment.
Exactly. And you have the evidence from my article.
Yeah, exactly. I just choose to invest differently. That is a joke. Please don't come for me. I also really enjoyed her Future Bright series that we've collaborated with Chanel.
Chanel.
Yeah. Every Wednesday, she is the one who is hosting that podcast, and you've just been able to also collaborate with her on money marketing, and she has spoken to some really exciting women in the industry, giving their backstories of how they got into the industry, and they're all so different, and it's just been really interesting to listen to, and I think our audience has also been really enjoying the episodes as well.
Yes, Chanel's been doing an absolutely fantastic job with that. Obviously, as a young female advisor in the profession, it's great. She's spoke at our conferences previously as well, and held her own when asked some difficult questions by audience member, sometimes sort of challenging. So I think, probably stepping outside of her comfort zone a little bit. But yeah, like you said, Kim, just hearing the stories of these people. I mean, obviously, Amanda does some great weekend essays. The team do some great ones where we're starting to get more insight into their lives as well. Just hearing these people that are actually in financial services, whether the debate continues as to if we're part of it or not. It's great to sort of see their story, or how things have changed, how they started out, what encouraged them into the profession in the first place as well.
Yeah. And also hearing them talk about like mentoring and encouraging other, especially women, to get into the industry as well, is really encouraging. So now that we are at the end of March and we're moving into a new month, can you give me a teaser for April? Any teasers for what you're working for April, for the April issue? Go ahead, Lois. I know that you've got the cover piece.
I will be writing my second cover in a row, just putting it out there. Have written, and it's gone to press, on the company LV and its epic journey to find love. I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to give loads away. It'll be being published on Monday, I think, and it's come out in the magazine to some people already, but probably tomorrow. Sorry. I won't say that actually, because let me just start again. So yeah, I'll be writing have written my second cover in a row, and I'll be doing it, or have written it, on LV and its epic quest to find love. I don't want to say too much, but obviously, LV was looking for a partner, and it was going to sort of wanting to be bought by Bain, but then its members voted that down. And then there was talk of it teaming up with Royal London, and that didn't go ahead. So the feature is just sort of looking at that and what might happen in the future. And it was really, really fun to write, and I hope it will be as fun to read. And I hope LV and Royal London have a good sense of humour.
Yeah, I sort of noted that in my editor's intro as well, just to very much sort of say good sense of humor is required. But I love the fact that it was Al LV writing about LV.
No one else gets them more. Also, the cover looks phenomenal. If you haven't had a chance to see the cover, either go on the website or get the actual physical copy. Both look beautiful. Mamadou, what do you have in store for us in April?
Yes, I did something on the consolidation boom. Yeah, I did a comment piece writing about how the market has changed from a buyer's market to a seller's market.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the gist of my comment piece for.
Yeah. Don't give us too much.
No.
And Amanda, I know that you do focus a lot on writing the features and the mag. So could you give us any tidbits from any of the pieces that you've worked on?
Well, Kim, I'm looking at what the new no-fault divorce rules will mean for advisors. I thought it was interesting because I'd heard that lawyers are predicting a bit of a spike in April, when the laws come in. And I was just thinking, does that mean, advisors are going to be inundated with divorcing couples? But the really interesting thing about this, I think, is, it remains to be seen whether it will cause more people to go down the DIY route and think they don't need advice because everything's amicable, they're not arguing so much potentially, and, whether they think they can dispense with legal advice as well. So that's where I am on that. And I've also got something coming up on whether advisors need to have wealth transfer strategies for widows and widowed women, I should say, because that they've got intergenerational wealth strategies in place, for transferring wealth down the generations. But it's often the women that are, first in line to receive that inheritance. So, do we need strategies for women specifically in these situations?
Yeah. Well, I think it sounds like we do, but I'm interested to read your findings. Mike, what about you? What can we look forward to from you in the April issue or in April?
Sure. So I did Money Marketing Meets with Sian Fisher. She's the outgoing chief executive of the CII. And that was a really interesting interview because the CII has come in for some controversy fairly recently with various articles So she touched on that and leading the CII through change and during a pandemic. And I also did a leader on the FCA and how it needs to spell out the data requirements for its forthcoming consumer duty, because if it doesn't do that, the consumer duty that it's trying to implement might run into trouble. So that's what I've got coming out.
Great. And finally, JB.
I wrote a feature about the UK Green Guild.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at, let's say, the genesis of the UK Green Bond, how the government came up with this idea, how it was developed, and also some reactions to, because there's been two issues of the bonds. So I looked at the reaction from the industry, so that is both providers and advisors.
Okay, great. So I think all of you guys have covered quite a lot of different topics. Is there anything that I haven't asked about? Anything that I've missed?
No, Kim, I think I'd just say that 12 issues of the monthly magazine that we've now produced. So the team have done a fantastic job. I've been getting some really nice comments from readers about the quality of the product. So if you haven't signed up for the magazine already, get in touch with us and I'm sure we can arrange for that. And like Kim said, there is a digital version as well, and obviously the content that we put up online. But I just want to say how proud I am of the team and the work that's been produced in that time.
Insert round of applause here. Just I might actually put a round of applause clip in. So yeah, awesome. That was really great, guys. I look forward to hearing more for the May issue. Wow. Time is going by so quickly. But thank you for joining me today, and we hope that you enjoy it.
Thanks, Kim.
Bye.
Please do keep up to date with all our new releases via Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you get your podcasts from. You can also keep up to date with all new content published on the Money Marketing website, as well as Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. See you next time.